Lesson 13. Rate, tempo, and change of pace. Voice acting is ruled time. I must match my delivery to specific time requirements. This is important when recording commercials or other scripts where timing is vital. My rate of speech can affect the meaning of what I am saying, i.e., in saying the phrase, "I feel really tired." If I say it at a fast rate, quickly, "I feel really tired," it sounds strange. Now I will say the same line at a slow rate. Slowly, "I feel really tired." This way, the rate matches the intended meaning, demonstrating that my rate of speech has bearing on the interpretation of what I am projecting. The mood or feeling of the message suggests the pace to follow. In this next paragraph, change the rate or tempo where I think it is appropriate. The next moment, hardly knowing how it happened, Tom found himself tangled in the underbrush. He'd been thrown from the car on impact. Painfully, he pulled himself up. He flexed his limbs, one by one, almost expecting to find broken bones. The back of his left hand was swollen. There was a slight cut on his left leg that he could see through a rip in his trousers. But miraculously, other than that, he seemed to be intact. He walked unsteadily to the car. The grill was badly mangled and the radiator was dripping a dark pool on the snow. Tom climbed behind the wheel. He saw by his watch that he had only a half hour to make it. He was almost afraid to try the starter. He turned the key and the engine roared to life. It was running. He glanced quickly at the dash panel. Oil pressure, fuel, temperature, everything looked all right. He backed the damaged car onto the highway, then into high gear for Syracuse. The speedometer climbed quickly, 60, 70, 80. The dark ribbon of road peeled out behind him. The needle climbed to 90. Tom grinned. This was it. He was back on his own private speedway. He'd make it after all. But suddenly clouds of blue-gray smoke rolled out from under the dash. Oil. There was a leak. The car began to slow of its own accord. The smoke grew thicker. His speed dropped to 30, 15, and he rolled the stricken car onto the shoulder of the road. That's an example of how rate can affect the mood of what you're saying. In this particular case, the action that was taking place was directly reflected by variations in rate. The rate of speech, or the number of words per minute, varies from person to person. It also depends on the type of material that's involved. Obviously, when announcing a detailed report on highway conditions, I may use a slower rate than if I am reading an energetic and enthusiastic commercial. Serious reads would be slow and deliberate, so that the listener could absorb the important details. Commercials may be animated and lively. A bulletin for anyone traveling Highway 417 today. Be aware of dangerous road conditions. For 7 miles along the Midwest train junction, anyone traveling north needs to remember that fog is seriously impairing visibility. It was the scene of a serious accident this morning. That's approximately 50 words, and our time was 23 seconds. Now let's time the commercial. It's here. Florida Orange, a new refreshment thrill. Serve it ice cold at parties and picnics with lunch and midnight snacks. It's as cool and crisp as a December sleigh ride. The taste of sparkling Florida Orange will heighten the fun, brighten the occasion. When I want refreshment, serve ice cold Florida Orange. That too was approximately 50 words, yet my time was only 18 seconds. This commercial was a full 5 seconds faster, and the number of words is about the same. My approach in the first announcement was to slow down so the listener would be able to absorb the important details of the message. In the commercial, I wanted to sound animated and enthusiastic. Increased enthusiasm means increased rate. A rough guide for most kinds of voice acting is about 150 words per minute. That would be just a shade faster than the announcement about highway conditions, and a little slower than the commercial. Keywords or phrases in a script can be stressed by slowing my rate of speech. This has much the same effect as using the pause for emphasis. After you've slowed down to emphasize a certain point, speed up after you've created the desired effect. Here's an example. You can see from these examples that emphasis can be increased by both slowing down and speeding up. When words or phrases are not too important to the overall meaning of what you're saying, try speeding up my rate in order to lessen the importance of these words. This helps to throw away the insignificant ideas and to highlight the truly important ones. The term horsepower as it relates to automobiles can be extremely misleading. The advertised horsepower has little bearing on how much power is delivered to the rear wheels under actual driving conditions. If I could equate horsepower to performance, things would be fairly simple, but it's much more involved than that. Horsepower generated by the engine has many jobs to do. Besides moving the wheels, there's the water pump, the fan belt, the generator, the power steering, the drive shaft, the differential. All these absorb horsepower and plenty of it. As a matter of fact, you'd be amazed at the actual rear wheel horsepower delivered by modern cars. Believe it or not, what's left to drive the car is only about 1/2 of what I started out with. As I can see, a change of pace is another useful item to add to my vocal skill set. A change of pace can emphasize the important ideas and hold the audience attention. Lesson 14. Stress and meaning. Stress is used not only to highlight certain words and ideas when we speak, but it's also a key part of pronunciation. Words of 2 or more syllables usually have one syllable that carries more stress than others. Here are some examples. Anyway, commercial narration articulation, discrete, contents, formidable, economy, pronunciation, converse, merciful, memorable. The syllable that carries the main stress is called the accented syllable. Whenever in doubt which syllable to stress, look it up in a dictionary and say the word over several times out loud to remember the pattern. Yes, practice makes perfect. Some words are stressed differently, depending on whether they are being used as nouns, adjectives, or verbs. Knowing when to change the stress will add considerable polish to our speech and lend added authority to what I say. Here are some common examples. The convict was serving a 3-year sentence. The evidence of the key witness was all it took to convict him. A transfer was being planned for the company's general manager. The board of directors decided to transfer him to another city. A protest was lodged against the unfair treatment. If the workers didn't approve, they had the right to protest. The conflict was caused by outside interference. Outside interference caused their activities to conflict. His conduct left much to be desired. His anxiety caused him to conduct himself in a strange way. His exploit was covered by hundreds of newsmen. He hoped to exploit the publicity to the full. It's almost a general rule that the first syllable is stressed when words of this kind are used as nouns, and that the stress is shifted to the last syllable when they are used as verbs. There are a few exceptions to this rule, such as consummate. This is stressed on the first syllable con, but when the word is used as an adjective, the stress shifts to the second syllable. This is the reverse of the usual rule. Here's an example. The salesman hoped to consummate the arrangements the following week. The salesman presented his story with consummate skill. Here is another exception to the rule. Verb. Because of the fast pace, it was necessary to alternate the 2 athletes. Adjective. Because of the fast pace, the 2 athletes performed in alternate 10-minute periods. Yes, there are 1 or 2 exceptions, which is true of almost every rule in the English language, but in almost all cases the stress is on the first syllable when the word is used as a noun or adjective, and on the second syllable when it's used as a verb. Make a list of all the words I can where this rule applies and check the pronunciation in a dictionary. In longer words, containing 3 or 4 syllables, more than 1 syllable is stressed. 1 syllable usually carries the main stress, another will have secondary stress, and the rest will have weaker stress. Here are some examples. Responsibility, communication, deterioration, misunderstanding, association, inflexibility, microscopic, connoisseur. Having the stress on the right syllables adds to the melody and rhythm of my speech. Most dictionaries mark words for primary and secondary stress. When in doubt, I will look it up. There are occasions when words must be stressed. When the meaning requires it, it's necessary to use the full word. Where is the nearest drugstore? He does not know which way to go. I will go to the station to meet the train. I can use the contracted form as long as it doesn't affect the sense of what you're saying. Now, let's consider words to stress in phrases and sentences, and how stress can affect the meaning. Emphasis, remember, is simply a means of making the meaning clear to the listener. First, I must understand the meaning of what I am saying. and the pattern of stress will automatically become clear. Generally speaking, the words that are normally stressed in most sentences are those that name objects, people, or places, words that help to describe them, and the verbs, or words of action. The connecting parts of speech, the prepositions and conjunctions, are usually thrown away. So are the articles the, a, and an. To show how meaning and stress are interwoven, let's move the stress from word to word in a sample sentence and see how the meaning changes. You said I went to the nearest store. Someone else may think otherwise. You said he went to the nearest store. You said I went to the nearest store. There's some doubt about whether you've gone yet. You said I went to the nearest store. I didn't go to the farthest. You said I went to the nearest store. Maybe I went to the bank. Another rule of stress is that in any context, it's the new words or ideas that receive the stress. Words or ideas that have been mentioned previously become subordinated, and when they're repeated, they're underplayed. The new or modifying thoughts about them are highlighted. Here's an example of misplaced stress. In Chicago last night, a 23-year-old man was critically injured in a traffic accident. George Smith is suffering extensive injuries, including a fractured skull. It was the 18th serious pedestrian accident this month in Chicago. Smith stepped in front of a car on Madison Avenue and was rushed to Chicago General Hospital. The driver of the car says he had no chance to avoid Smith and that the injured man stepped into the traffic stream against a red light. You can see what happens if I stress words or ideas that have already been mentioned. This time, I'll try to stress or highlight the new ideas as they appear and underplay the repeated ideas. Read it again with normal stress. In Chicago last night, a 23-year-old man was critically injured in a traffic accident. George Smith is suffering from extensive injuries, including a fractured skull. It was the 18th serious pedestrian accident this month in Chicago. Smith stepped in front of a car on Madison Avenue and was rushed to Chicago General Hospital. The driver of the car says he had no chance to avoid Smith and that the injured man stepped in the traffic stream against a red light.